Okay, good evening. We're going to go ahead and get started. Madam Clerk, could you call the order, please? Sorry, let me start again. I'm going to call the meeting to order at 6:30 p.m. Madam Clerk, can you please call the roll?
Mayor Troopman.
Here.
Vice Mayor Samaria.
Here.
Commissioner Johnson Sadella.
Here.
Commissioner Tudor.
Here.
Commissioner Wise.
Here.
Can we stand for the pledge? And I'm going to ask the Vice Mayor to lead us off.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You're too fine.
You can't do that.
You're fine.
I almost forgot the word.
This evening, the Commission is holding two public hearings. The purpose of the first public hearing is to set the millage rate at 9.7 for fiscal year 2019-20 through Ordinance 2019-03. The second public hearing is for the purpose of adopting a budget for the village for the fiscal year of 2019-2020 for Ordinance 2019-04. During this evening's public hearing, the public will have an opportunity to comment on each of the ordinances separately. A special commission meeting for the sole purpose of selecting the second at-large seat for the Charter Review Board will follow these public hearings. Public comments specific to that item should be made at that time. The public hearing for setting the millage rate for fiscal year 2019-20 is now open. Attorney Rodriguez, can you please read the decorum rules followed by the second reading of Ordinance 2019-03?
All comments must be addressed to the Commission as a body and not to individuals. Any person making impertinent or slanderous remarks or who becomes boisterous while addressing the Commission shall be barred from further audience before the Commission by the presiding officer unless permission to continue or again address the Commission is granted by the majority vote of the Commission members present. No clapping, applauding, heckling, or verbal outbursts in support or in opposition to a speaker or his or her remarks shall be permitted. No signs or placards shall be allowed in the Commission chambers. Please mute or turn off your cell phone or pager at the start of the meeting. Failure to do so may result in being barred from the meeting. Persons exiting the chamber shall do so quietly. Ordinance 2019-03 for second reading. An ordinance of the Village Commission of the Village of Biscayne Park, Florida, establishing the fiscal year 2019 to 2020 millage rate at 9.70 mils for each $1,000 of assessed valuation upon real and personal property within the village limits of the Village of Biscayne Park, providing for an effective date.
Thank you, Madam. We're going to open for public comments now. Madam Clerk, please call the first person wishing to speak on Ordinance 2019-03.
No one signed for this.
Close on public comments. Are there any comments from the commissioners? No. Okay. Is there a motion to approve Ordinance 2019-03?
I move to approve Ordinance 2019-03.
Is there a second for that motion?
I'll second the motion.
Madam Clerk, will you call roll, please?
Mayor Troopman.
Yes.
Vice Mayor Samaria.
No.
Commissioner Johnson Sadella.
Yes.
Commissioner Tudor.
Yes.
Commissioner Wise.
Yes.
Motion passes 4-1. This concludes the public hearing for setting the millage rate at 9.7 for fiscal year 1920. The public hearing for Ordinance 2019-04 for the purpose of adopting a budget for fiscal year 2019-20 is now open. Attorney Rodriguez, please introduce the second reading of Ordinance 2019-04.
Ordinance number 2019-04, second reading. An ordinance of the Village Commission of the Village of Biscayne Park, Florida, adopting a budget for fiscal year 2019 to 2020 for the Village of Biscayne Park, Florida, providing for conflicts, providing for severability, providing for an effective date.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, please call the first person who wishes to speak on Ordinance 2019-04, and thus we're opening public comments.
Dan Keys. Okay. Rox Ross.
Clarification of a couple of not the last meeting, but the meeting before. The mayor referred to the reserves at the time that she came into office as being somewhere around 400,000 plus or minus, and I'm not sure where that number was drawn from. I like to look at the audited financial statements, and our auditor reported that where that number came from. Just looking at your agenda this evening, ordinance number 2019-03 says that the taxable value for operating purposes is $231,201,560. I believe that is the number that the property appraiser gave us. However, ordinance number 18 says that the taxable value for operating purposes is 2.8, 382,630. I believe that number is incorrect, or at least they don't reconcile with each other, so you want to correct that when you discuss the resolution to make that amendment. At the first reading, I offered my comments about the various contingencies that are buried in the different departments and in the summary page of the budget. I don't agree with your reasoning that that's $128,000. Currently, with the adjustment that was required to be made on the taxable gross revenue generated by the millage of 9.7, the contingencies now add up to 174,564. Those are contingencies buried throughout the budget. That's 3/4 of the millage. 3/4 of the millage. Now, since you've already set the millage at 9.7, a portion of that to unrestricted reserves, and dedicate some of that money to replenish. Even if FEMA comes back and pays us the full amount that they would be willing to obligate, we're still going to have a portion that the village has to pick up. So rather than the 25,000 in your professional services contingency, you might want to move that into a dedicated reserves. Thank you.
Thank you.
One more thing. Thank you so much for advertising correctly this year, so we don't have to go through the correction again last year. Thank you.
Madam Clerk, next person?
Thank you. No one.
No one. Okay.
Chuck Roswell, 66 Boulevard. I share the same concerns about how contingencies spread around and setting that aside. I want to talk about that SID audit for a moment, because apparently, what I understand, the manager stated that he had not responded to the request for information, if I understood it correctly, which hadn't been done even in March, even in June. It's past the date. And the problem with that is, even if we represented that possibly we were still in conversations about this. However, my concern is the following. We haven't accounted for that in the budget. The problem is if they think that we have X amount of dollars, which is 800 and some odd thousand, I think the report says, and we only have actually about 600 because we owe some of that money to the general fund. So what's in the bank account isn't the entire balance. So let's say we have 600, they think we got 800, we got maybe $250,000 going. Do we need to set aside something for the possibility that they ask for that money back? I don't know. It's going to have to come from general fund because we don't have it in the SID fund. Or hopefully they'll still let us account for those funds. But time has expired, from what I understand, based on what the manager said. He said he failed to respond, that's my understanding. The only other thing I would add is that as far as I noticed that it just seems like we're under budgeting. So in other words, we're sitting out the situation. So at the end of the year, it looks like we're making more money than we're really going to spend. I mean, because based on the finance director's projected numbers, we have $500,000. That's what it says, right? We might have saved $500,000, and if we actually, I believe, did save the prior year, maybe $300,000 or $400,000, but that's not. There's something wrong. I mean, we're supposed to be budgeting so that we're spending the money that we use. If we're setting up a situation that we're saving money, then we should be specifically saying, well, we have a purpose. We're going to try to save money and put it in the reserve. That's fine. We didn't do that. So I'm kind of curious how we're coming into these overages or underages, depending how you look at it. Thank you.
Thank you. Madam Clerk,
I
anybody
have
else?
David Raymond.
I'm sorry, just 1 second, because that mic is making you sound like Mickey Mouse.
Mike is not good.
Hold on.
Thanks.
That was interesting. Go ahead, David.
Okay.
Sorry.
Do I need to repeat that, or
Mr.
we're good?
Raymond, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Please.
Hi. I'll just say hi. So David Raymond,
Hold on a second.
11520
Hold on one second. Could you reset the clock for him, please? Thank you.
Northeast 9th Avenue. So I wanted to thank you again for your work on the budget to everyone, and I wanted to thank you. Today is World Climate Speak Out Day. I won't call it a protest, Speak Out Day. So I want to thank you for your support of the drainage issues in Biscayne Park on that note. And I did ask a question at the last meeting, and I don't know if it ever got answered, which was about there was some money in the CIT budget for a transportation connector route or whatever it was, however it was phrased. And I just wonder what that was and how that might work, and whether or not, if that is going to happen, I just wanted to know what it is. And if it isn't going to happen, I wonder if any of the money in the CIT budget that hasn't been used, because there looks like there's some money there that needs to be spent. And having spent most of my life working the county and the state, I know how they like to take that back sometimes if you don't spend it. I was just wondering if there's a plan B for things like fixing the roads or drainage or things like that the use is compatible with the CIT funds. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else with public comments? Having none, we'll close public comments and we'll open for discussion with the Commission, and also like to go ahead and ask the manager if you'd like any other information by Mr. Winklejohn or yourself.
If Mr. Winklejohn can come to the podium for questions, and I think he can answer any questions that the Commission has. I've met with the commissioners this week and answered all the questions that have been posed, so I think we're ready to go.
The only updates I have for you are a couple of details that the Commission requested at the last meeting. They're reflected in this budget, the beginning of which was the police department. We added a little more detail on the left side of the salary page to show all of the officers and the three command staff, or four command staff that were affected by the changes. We didn't do that last time, so now you can see, and it clarified for all of us that the intent in the actual funding of all positions in the police department were given the approved or the directed salary increases. So that clarification is made, including the chiefs as well. So there was a little fogginess there. We cleared it up. The second thing was the CITT. I believe in there is some detail over the entire fund. What you did historically was you only budgeted what you thought you might use each year of that bank account, if you call it that, the CITT, the $800,000, which roughly is what's in your bank account now. Historically, we actually added a little detail about a year ago to show the split between road and transit. So we're adding in the actual total fund balance into our regular report. So you'll have total clarity on that whatsoever. In the current due fund, I heard that comment. It's only in the $50,000 to $80,000, and that's about right for the way the money flows through for this time of year. So I don't believe there's any issue with the audit. Should they retract funds or there be an allocation of the funds, it was fairly nominal total. And I believe once you allocate or show them a qualifying project, you move the clock back. If they choose to take funds, they take it from the back of the contributions, not the front of the contributions. So the $800,000 as a whole gets reduced, which if you don't have $800,000 worth of project contracted, then there's no liability to it. So you don't have a contract for that money. It's just there until you find something to spend it on that qualifies. And then once you've contracted for something, then you're obligated. Right now it's a fund that's sitting and waiting for projects. The only thing you do fund is some roadway lighting. So you're off the hook in terms of worry in that respect. But the bigger picture that we all understand, of course, is we'd like to use every penny of our resources to their maximum ability, and I know staff and the manager have that in hand. So from a finance standpoint, I think you're tracking it correctly, and we're giving you more information than you had in the past. So those are the highlights that changed since the first reading, and I'm happy with the way the information has flowed between staff, and I think that we had a really significant leap in understanding. Remembering back to last year when it was very foggy, how the pieces all fit together from everyone's standpoint because of a lot of new people. but I felt like we really leapt to first class this year. So thank you for your support.
Are there any questions, Mr. Winklejohn, from the commission?
Well, I spoke to you
Yes, sir.
outside. One of the questions, one of the concerns that I have is that, oh, that's not me. I'm innocent.
It's a $1 fine.
One of the problems that I have is, and I met with the city manager, and he answered my questions, but it's not reflected in here. And I'll give you an example. Miscellaneous revenue, it says that we had this year 12,898. My concern is, why can't it say what that money was that came in? It just says miscellaneous revenue that came in. Suppose we had miscellaneous expenses. Why can't it be listed? I mean, there's enough space on the page to list something.
It's excellent feedback. If I'm understanding you on the revenue sections of the budget.
I'm sorry, that was revenues, page 16 of 19, sorry.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea to have added that there. Typically, it was only $1,000 or $2,000.
Right.
This year, we were tracking. I believe it was the off-duty revenue
Right.
goes in there, so it's a lot more money, and so we can clarify that. I appreciate that.
So any of the stuff that we mentioned, it can still be put into the paper.
Yeah, the narrative part of the budget is exactly that. It's supposed to be the history and the logic and the thinking at the time as to how those numbers were intended in terms of future, and in the past columns, it should give detail as to what was done.
Yeah.
And that's how we've sort of constructed our whole process with staff all the way to the commission. Is what did we do with last year's money? What did we actually do? What did we plan to do? What did we actually do? What was the balance of that money? What do we want to do next year? And so all three pieces are in front of you at the same time. We tried to do that. The miscellaneous is, when you have 60 revenue lines, it probably slid past us that we didn't give it more time.
See, because
It's a good point.
a lot of what the residents have concerns about is self-explanatory if it was put in line item vetoes. I mean, I can understand if it's a whole bunch of stuff you don't need to do it, but some simple stuff like that's one, and then there's others that I have that I don't need to go into because, but I think we need to, at this time, the way this is right now, I can't support this budget if I don't have those items in there that explains for the residents to see, because all the information is not in there. Now, it's in there for me as a commissioner. I get to see the information, but the residents don't get to see the information, and I think that's what we're supposed to do.
May I ask, I'd like clarification on that, if I may. The residents get the same thing we're looking at, pretty much? I mean, they have the same
Okay,
exact
well,
budget,
but
so I don't
yes,
understand what you're referring to.
No, okay. Well, perfect example, miscellaneous revenue doesn't tell you where the money came from.
Oh, so the details, you want
That's what I'm
more
talking about.
itemized?
I'm talking
Okay.
about it. No, it's more for details than anything else. I mean, this is stuff that I think is, maybe I'm wrong, it's simple to put in there. I mean, it might take time more to type it up, but you'll solve a lot of problems that the residents are having when it's
Right,
the ones with
and
cell phones.
there's two sides to that. I make a note that miscellaneous, by its very term, isn't descript, right?
Yeah.
So that one might make sense to put at least a little narrative to
Right.
say what kinds of things fit in there, even if we don't go through the time to spell them all out. But
Yeah.
we wouldn't do that in every department, because every department would have tools. Well, you want to list every tool? No, we wouldn't do that. That would be
Yes.
absurd. So there's a fine balance between such concepts, and miscellaneous lends itself to a little more detail because it's in.
Well,
The
like-
term miscellaneous does that. I get it.
I'll give you the ones in just an example. These are just simple ones, like the telephone for the commissioners on page 5 of 8. It says $3,000. That turns out, as the city manager explained it to me, that's the monthly fees. That would have been so simple to write that, and not everybody think that the $3,000 came from the 4 commissioners' phones, which it wasn't. It was for the monthly fees of, I think it was 48.
Okay. I mean, that's a little nuanced, but I get it, yeah.
Okay, so I mean, that's something that's simple for the residents to
It's for
understand.
the cost of the phones, how it's
No.
paid and what it's paid for. I get it.
Yeah.
The phones are already purchased.
I know, so right, but the residents assuming that the $3,000, and I was one of them, that assumed that $3,000 was for the phones, and it wasn't. It was for the monthly fees. This is just something that I'm saying is so simple to have it written down that the residents can see. And then the one for $110,000 on page 9 of 25 for the attorney fees. Now it says $110,000. Well, it was simple explained with $75,000 that we budget, $15,000 that we put in for FEMA. That's what the commission approved. I couldn't figure out where the other $20,000 came from. He explained it, excuse me, the city manager explained it, but in case you forgot, and I forgot what that was. That was already there, that he just moved over. Again, that's something that's simple, that can be easily explained. You'll get residents not wondering where the $20,000 came from.
Good point.
And then the one on page 20 of 25 in the administration, it has filing fees miscellaneous. It turns out that $1,000, this is something simple, is the Florida League of Cities. Again, that's what we could have just said, Florida League of Cities. That would have been so simple, right? There would be no question of where the $1,000 come from. I think the point I'm trying to make, I don't need to go into all of them, I'll give you the rest of them, but the point I'm trying to, it's so simple just to list the stuff, and it would solve a lot of the concerns.
Right.
I look at it as, is this budget for the commission only to understand, or is it for the residents to understand? And I think it's also for the residents to understand, because that's who we work for. Correct? Okay. That's my point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Tudor, did you have a...
Thank you.
I didn't know. I thought you... No?
No.
Okay. Anybody else?
I just wanted to follow up. The manager and I had discussed it, but I know that one of our residents brought up again about the CITT.
I'm
If you
sorry.
want to repeat what's going to be happening with that, I think you told me that Betancourt would be here.
Absolutely.
Could you lend her the mic, because that's
For-
what happened.
Thank you. So I just remind the audience.
No, I'd spoken with Javier Betancourt, who's the director of CITT, and he's going to be at the commission meeting in October. He had originally planned to be here in September, and he'll be here in October instead. He wasn't able to make the September meeting to discuss with the commission the uses for the CITT funds that are approved, what we can and cannot do, so that we can go ahead and put together our 5-year plan, finish out this audit, and get the management. We also we're still looking for the details from some of these funds from years ago, because we just don't have records from 8 years ago that, on some of these items, so we're having to go back to banks and that sort of thing to get those. But he'll be here to explain that in October. Right now, we haven't done a management response, and I've done that intentionally. It wasn't a failure. It was to, until we get this resolved, I can't respond accurately. And so we're still digging for that.
And just to give you a little bit more background, because I think that sort of gives the end of the story, and maybe you were looking for the beginning. Initially, at one of our very earliest meetings, we voted on some legislative priorities, and one of them was some sort of a walkway for residents, a pedestrian walkway of some kind, because so many of us heard a request for that while we were campaigning and meeting residents. And the manager and I discussed the potential of putting some CITT funds toward that to connect the bus stop at the south of 6th Avenue with the bus stop at the north of 6th Avenue coming through the village. So creating a transit connector so that people could come from any point within the park and reach the southernmost bus stop and the northernmost bus stop. If that will actually be how it comes to fruition, we don't know. We are just doing everything that we can to learn from Mr. Betancourt how we might use those funds to see if we can achieve that goal that so many residents requested. That's how the transit pathway came to pass.
And I also wanted to just mention the roads. That is still a priority of this commission. We all talked about that the last meeting when Senator Pisa was here, and so a lot of that, what you're calling the bank account of the $800,000, is going to be looked at to do roads. I know the manager's already putting together a plan.
As well as drainage on 9th Avenue. So.
Smile. So that's part of that piece as well. Okay. Anybody else on anything on the budget? Nope. Okay. Is there a motion to adopt budget for fiscal year 2019, which would be ordinance 2019-04?
I move to adopt ordinance 2019-04.
Is there a second? I guess I'll second. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Mayor Troopman,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Samaria,
No.
Commissioner Johnson Sardella,
Yes.
Commissioner Tudor,
Yes.
Commissioner Wise,
Yes.
Motion passes 4-1. This concludes the public hearing for the adoption of a budget for fiscal year 2019-20. As a reminder, there's a special meeting to select the second at-large seat that will take place following this meeting. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting at this point, the public hearing? Sir, if you'll give me one moment, sir. This unfortunately is the close of public comments. This would be very unusual to open it back up. We have another public hearing coming in about 5 minutes. Did you want to discuss the budget, sir, or did you want to discuss something else? Okay, would you wait about 5 minutes and then we'll have you up? And if you would be so kind just to sign in with the clerk, she'll have you up.
Right here.
Thank you so much, sir. All right, with that, is there a motion to adjourn? Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. This public hearing is adjourned. We're going to reconvene in 3 minutes.